It is October the 30th, 1998. My name is Charlie Henson, and today I'm interviewing Leoda Aten. I appreciate you coming, and first of all, we're going to start with your full name and kind of who was your family?
My family were the Andersons. I was born in Iowa on the 13th of March, 1921, and I was the youngest of 6 children. My mother died when I was 10 months old. I was raised by a great aunt and uncle in Cedar Falls, Iowa. My great aunt and uncle became mother and daddy. And when I graduated from high school in 1940, because he was going to be moving to Toledo, Ohio, where his son and daughter already lived. And I seemed to be their child. And I moved there and went to Davis Business College. And I think it was the best move because that's where I met Woodrow Aten.
Tell me the first time you laid eyes on Woodrow Aten.
All right, that is wonderful. Woodrow Aten was a second lieutenant, and somehow or other, and I can't tell you who the person was, but asked me if I would like to have a date with this nice second lieutenant. And I said I would. Woody and I met on the 9th of September in 1942. It was a blind date. We went to Casey's nightclub in Toledo. We didn't drink. We were with his buddy, Warner Cruz, who had a date. And we just had a wonderful evening. And they were supposed to be moving out to Camp Campbell, Kentucky the next day. Woody was stationed at Camp Perry, right outside of Toledo. And they were to be moving to Camp Campbell, Kentucky the next day, but they didn't.
Tell me what he looked like when you first saw him.
Very handsome, blue eyes, very handsome. Just
What color hair? What color?
blonde, very handsome, just a very nice, wonderful person. But I didn't give it that much thought. Actually, I know I liked him. Just a very gentleman, just a wonderful, wonderful person, and we had a wonderful evening. He called me the next day for another date, and I already had a commitment. They moved out then the following day. A few days later, I got a letter and a little squirrel thermometer from the Camp Campbell gift shop. And on the back, he had written, "To you, Leoda dear, with love, Woody." And a nice, nice letter. Well, I had to answer the letter, and I had to thank him for the squirrel. And that's what began a long correspondence. And the box of letters is here at the museum, will be at the museum. Hundreds of letters, emails, his letters, my letters.
What do you remember about his writings during that time that he was in, he went to Kentucky? What do you remember about that? Maybe not personally, you may not want to share that. His experiences, how he felt about the Army, how
Woody
that played in with y'all's relationship.
Woody loved the Army. Woody came from a farm, and he knew how to work. He knew how to accept responsibility. And to him, he enjoyed it. He really, really did. He really enjoyed it.
what were his duties? Was he in the artillery? Was he in the infantry?
He was in the maintenance.
Okay.
In the maintenance, he was the one that repaired tanks and things. Woody also was a teacher. He did a lot of teaching of the Army troops.
How did your relationship continue?
Through the letters, Woody and I only knew each other 9 months. And out of those 9 months, Woody only saw me 6 times. He was at Camp Campbell, and I was in Toledo, and he would get perhaps a 2-day pass. Through the letters, we learned about each other. I have a firm belief that God puts people exactly where they are supposed to be at the right time. And I think we were just meant to be together. I do.
So, did y'all get engaged, or?
We went to Cincinnati in the Easter of April. It was too far for him to try. We met in Cincinnati, and at that time, we decided to get married in June. No, we weren't what you would call engaged, but we were committed. I mean, we really were. And we had planned our wedding for a Sunday early in June. But then either Aberdeen or Fort Belvoir wanted him for 2 weeks. So I had to postpone. But at that time, you didn't plan the enormous big weddings that you do now. I had a $20 dress. It was a war wedding, and it was very simple, very beautiful, in the chapel of St. Paul's Church in Toledo, Ohio. Very simple, but very nice, and it tied the knot.
When did you meet his family? Was it at the wedding? Or before?
I met his family, yes. His mother and his sister and a sister-in-law came to Toledo to the wedding. And that was the first that I had met the family, or they had met me. And they weren't too thrilled about Woody was the baby. But it all worked out fine, and we were married on a Sunday, and on a Monday morning, we all got in the car and headed back for Pennsylvania to his mother's farm, and we spent the week there, and I, of course, met the rest of the family. And then we left to go to Clarksville, Tennessee, to go to Camp Campbell, Kentucky. And on the way, we stopped in Washington, D.C. Yes.
That's a very unusual honeymoon compared to today. Was that something that a lot of people did, was to go spend time with
I don't think so. I think it was just a matter of, I have no idea. Those were the war years. Hey, the honeymoon, once you got your guy, that was the honeymoon. I think during the war years, just to be with we didn't have the fancy weddings that they have now. But it worked.
So where'd y'all settle? In Clarksville?
Clarksville, Tennessee, we settled in a little house, and I have the address. Just a room. Woody, of course, was at the camp all the time, but he could come home. Woody was an officer. We stayed. I had one room, and you'll never guess how I did the ironing on a suitcase. And he could come in some evenings. But I made a lot of friends with a lot of the other wives, We'd go out to lunch or do things together.
Did, when you say one room, did that mean like an efficiency apartment or a room in a
No,
house? or-
just one room. Just a room with the bed, and no, you pretty much went out to eat your lunch. Right. Just a place to sleep and to be, hang your hat.
So then, did you work during that time?
No, I did not. No, I did not. Didn't have to. He was a lieutenant. I didn't want to. I didn't need to.
So how long were y'all in Tennessee?
In Tennessee, we were at Camp Campbell for a while, but then we did the 3-month Tennessee maneuvers. I would say we were in Tennessee. From Clarksville, we went to Murfreesboro. Earl and Jenny Hoyt, Lieutenant Hoyt and his wife Virginia, Jenny, were our best friends. We went to Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where the Hoyts and the Atens lived in the same house. The guys, of course, were at camp, but we were there. We had Woody and I had the room with the fireplace. Earl and Jenny had a bedroom upstairs, but we also had a kitchen where we could cook. And once in a while they could come in from camp, and it seems to me that we went out. When we got word that they could come home, we would go get them, because Woody had the car. And Jenny and I had the car.
Tell me about the Tennessee maneuvers, what it was like to be on the home end of that thing.
Woody still wrote letters, and I still wrote letters to him, because there would be a week or two sometimes that you didn't get to see them. So we still corresponded. But I can remember the one letter that I have, he was a little upset because they came to the house and we weren't there. But we never knew for sure when they might be coming. But that letter is in the collection of where he was a little upset. But no, it's... I would say that the Tennessee maneuvers were a little difficult for the men who had to be out in the field. It was... Being an Army wife, you accepted what there was to be. That it was good when you could get the time with them. But it was just good to be able to be that close to them. A lot of the wives did not be, with them.
Was that a couple choice? Because I know some women followed their husbands wherever they went.
I did. Yes. And I was able to do that. Mm-hmm. Yes. And from Murfreesboro, after Woody, I have to tell this. Woody found some cedar wood, and he carved 2 lamps that were to be lamps. However, they never got finished as lamps. But on the one he engraved, Tennessee Maneuvers, 1943. And he also made a little cedar chest for me out of a little cedar log. And he engraved Pudgy on that. Now that set is going to be at the museum because of the engraving of the Tennessee Maneuvers and because it was done at that particular time and it daresn't be lost in the world. It's hard to part with it, but It's here. And I'm the only pudgy in the world.
That was his nickname for you?
Mhm.
What happened after Murfreesboro?
After Murfreesboro, we went to Camp Chaffee, Arkansas for 3 weeks. The guys went with the troops, and Ginny and I drove the car. And there again, we had to find a home for the 2 couples. And we always stuck together into the same house. And I have to tell you, it's in my story that I have written. Somehow or other, we parked our car at a parking meter. And like all people, we didn't get back in time to put more money in. We got a parking ticket. We never paid it, and we never got caught. We made a lot of memories all through them, and that's just one of them.
Was he still a second lieutenant as he moved along, or did he?
He was, yes, he didn't become a first lieutenant until he got to Camp Barkley.
So what were his duties? Did they remain the same from camp to camp?
Yes, they did. And he also was kind of a teacher. He taught a lot of them.
What kind of things did he teach?
How to put a gun together, probably how to repair tanks and how to do things like that. I have sent all of his training books and all of that thing.
Get me to Barkley.
Get you to Barkley?
Get us to Barkley. Mm-hmm.
How do you mean?
Oh, like just telling from Arkansas until they, and did the other couple go to Barkley also?
Well, Jenny Hoyt and I drove together in Woodrow's car. And I did not have a driver's license. So Woody was teaching me to drive, but I did not have a driver's license. So she did all of the driving. And even after we got to Barkley, Woody and I, of course, had the car ourselves. But no, Jenny and I took our things that we could take, you know, your clothes and things like that. We drove Woody's car from Camp Chaffee to Camp Barkley. Now, I don't know if we, and of course, Woody and Earl went with the troop train. Been fun.
So what did you do when you got to Abilene, Texas? Was there some place to go on base that would help you find housing, or how did you find housing for
You know,
yourself?
I'm not really sure how we did find the house, but we did have, we were very lucky. We had a very, I just called it a cute little house because it was all that we needed. It had the bedroom and living room, just a combination, and a kitchen and a bathroom and a closed-in porch in the back. Do you want me to tell you about the kitchen?
Yes.
The kitchen needed papering because it was dirty. So Woody and I went to get the paper. And of course, I had a lot of time on my hands. And I decided it was just a small room, and I thought, well, I could do the papering. Now, I didn't know anything about putting the ceiling on first or anything about really matching it. But I got it on the walls. Woody wasn't real thrilled about that. But after we got the ceiling on and the border and everything, it came out all right. It was clean. But it really was one of the first little squabbles we could have had, but we didn't. But I mean, that was a memory.
What physically did your kitchen look like?
Physically?
Yeah, like if you were to walk into the kitchen, what did it look like? What did it look like to you?
When we first walked in, it looked rather dirty and greasy and the whole bit. It was just a small kitchen with a stove and a table, and just like a kitchen ought to look. I cooked a meal for McAfoose. I can't think what his first name was, but Woody invited him out. What I knew about cooking. No, it was a perfectly okay kitchen. It's okay. Not fancy.
What did y'all do about dishes and utensils and things like that?
We bought a few. I still have. I still have a couple of the pieces that we bought. And I have the coffee pot, the drip coffee pot that now would be classed as an antique. Yeah, we bought our own dishes.
Was Woody able to come into town most days?
A lot of the time not. But he was, yes. He was able to.
So what was the life, what did you do to, okay, number one, did you kind of know his schedule? You kind of knew which days he was going to come home?
Yes.
And how did you, what was your life like?
My life, I got a sewing machine. I think I rented a sewing machine and made a couple outfits. Oh, that's so long ago, but I think some of the wives got together to do lunches and just do things. And a lot of the wives were getting pregnant and having babies and stuff, right? And some of them were even going back home. It's hard to remember, but I know that we were busy, and I certainly never was bored. We had a big, big yard, and I can't remember how we mowed the grass. I don't know who mowed the grass. I thought about that today, as to who mowed the grass. I know we didn't have a lawnmower. Maybe we borrowed. But I know we had a badminton set. We played badminton. A lot of the people came out. The Army buddies. It's hard to remember back that far, but I know that we weren't really idle. Oh, we went on a lot of picnics. And I would love to find the high rock that we stood on to look down to see the beautiful landscape. We went to a movie one time, and perhaps you've seen the cartoon where the little flea goes through the dog's back singing "Food Around the Corner." Earl Hoyt and I had a fine sense of humor. When we would go on picnics, you would hear Earl gathering the wood singing "Food Around the Corner." Even to this day, when I talk to Earl Hoyt, the "Food Around the Corner" deal is still there. Yeah, we went on a lot of picnics. In fact, there are some pictures in the photo album that have pictures of the cows and one of me making hamburgers over the fire. Yeah, we found things to do.
What was it like for you to realize that Woody was fixing to leave?
Well, I'll tell you, Earl Hoyt left first. He was with the group that had to go over first to make ready for the 12th to come. Woody and I left our little house and moved in where Earl and Ginny lived. Ginny's baby was due in September, so we could not make the trip to Detroit and Toledo. Woodrow left in September to go over with the rest of them, and I stayed behind to stay with Ginny while she had her baby. Her mother came from Detroit, Michigan, to be with us. And her baby was born. and Mrs. Sarvis and Jenny and little Michael boarded the train, and I stood and watched that train leave. The lady across the street from Woody and I went to live with her until I could find somebody to get me and my car to Toledo, Ohio. I was alone. Everybody had left, but I had a message at the Army bulletin board that anybody headed for Toledo, Ohio, to contact me, that I needed a driver. And I was barely pregnant myself, needed to get me and my car to Toledo, Ohio. And I did have a nice young man that answered, and we drove night and day. And I did get to Toledo.
What's it like to be pregnant with a baby, and your husband goes to war, and you have to get a ride, go back home, and like, what is that like? And is being pregnant, is that a consolation, or is it fearful? Or
No,
what was it
everybody
like?
else was getting pregnant, and I wanted to get pregnant too, so I was glad. Very happy.
Well, was it just part of that time that's just the way it happened, that dads wouldn't be home when babies were born? And
Very true. A lot of the babies that were already born, the fathers had to leave anyway. So yeah, it's just something that everybody worked together at the same time. I would be afraid now to have advertised for anybody to take me on that trip. But back in those days, everybody cared about everybody else. And it was okay.
so you went back. What did you do when you got back to Toledo? Did you go back home?
When I
or
get
did
back to Toledo, there again, I found another place to live because the great aunt and uncle were rather elderly, and I didn't want to burden them with myself and a baby. So I found an apartment in Perrysburg, Ohio, which is very close to Toledo and to my parents. And I worked until 2 weeks before Anne-Marie was born. Just at a store that had appliances. At that time, it was hard to get washers, dryers. I just had a job. And it didn't bring in that much. And of course, I had Woody's allotment.
On the allotments, was that money sent directly to the wives? And did he sign papers for that before he left?
Mm-hmm.
And tell me about how that worked and how much you got and all that stuff.
Well, you didn't really get a lot, but I sent my allotment right back to the bank in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, because that's where his bank was, and that was just sent it back to their bank. But I also had the allotment I sent back to the Bloomsburg bank because I wanted us to have a little something saved for when he came home. And the money that I earned, I put into the Perrysburg bank that I used to live on. And it worked.
So did y'all continue to write and that?
Write letters.
Uh-huh.
Woody wrote 2 and 3 a day. There are hundreds of letters hundreds of letters. Females. Yes, we did. Even when our baby was born, I sent even the footprints in a letter. It was hard. Hey, it's hard. I can remember at Christmas time being with my great uncle, mother, and dad at a Christmas gathering, and their daughter was reading a letter that she had received from somebody in Alaska. And all of a sudden, I got this horrible wave of loneliness and homesickness. And I went out to the kitchen and was having a terrible time, and my mother came out and wanted to know what was the matter, and I said I just was so homesick for Woody. And she said I just had to straighten up because it couldn't be helped, and just to straighten up. She had been through the First World War, so she knew what it was like to have somebody in the First World War. So she knew what it was, and she just told me to straighten up, and I did. But you did have the overwhelming feeling of just thought you had to get a hold of them.
That's a different time than today, huh?
But it was war, and it was frightening for all concerned, even those that were over. But if I had to do it, I would do it all over again.
Were the letters from Woody, were they pretty much upbeat, or what were they like? Did he look to you for encouragement, or did he see himself as encouragement to you, or how did you feel about it? How did that?
I just am surprised that they even made it across, because they were so they are so loving and so. Now I think that we just both depended on the love that went back and forth with those letters. I don't know how else to explain it.
When he wrote 2 or 3 times a day, did you get them? Were there periods of times that you didn't get anything, or did you get letters about every day or every day or two?
The mail came through really very well, I would say, both ways. But of course, I had a lot to tell him. After our baby was born, I had a lot to tell him. I had a lot to tell him even before. There were a lot of things that he couldn't talk too much about because of, the rules and the regulations about what they could put into the mail. But you knew that he was well and that everything was okay.
Okay, you're a young mother. Did you go back to work, or did you stop working?
I stopped working after our baby was born. Mm-hmm.
Tell me how day to day, in and out, being a mother, having a child, about rationing, about all those sort of things. What was it like to be a woman with a child, just day in and day out with all those issues that the war brought?
I think you took better care of your baby than you did yourself. I had a lot of support because my family was right in the area. So I had a lot of support. I had a lot of friends. We would go to the movies. You just took each day as it came and did with it.
What kind of rations did you get?
Um, the cigarettes were rationed. Um, my mother would stand in line to get a pack of cigarettes, one time for her son-in-law and one time for her son. No, there was sugar and things like that, but I didn't use that much because, hey, I was alone. I didn't really use that much.
Did you get different amounts of the stamps for like different size families or adults and children, or?
I'm not sure about that. I'm really not sure about that.
Did you have gardens and things like that?
I didn't because I was in, no. I think perhaps the brother did, yes. I think Andy did. But he had the availability. I lived in an apartment. No, I did not.
Were there other women in the apartment that?
Do you mean the Army wives?
Yeah.
No. No. Because Perrysburg and Toledo were not too Army, were not too military. And I did not really know too many wives. Most of my friends were not married to Army people.
Was Toledo a place of? Was there a lot of industry and things that would keep those men from going? Like,
Well,
I mean, those jobs that would.
Libby's glass factory was there, and the Overland Willys automobile. Oh yes, Toledo was a big.
Now, he wasn't allowed to tell you about
Movements.
movements and
Right.
things like that.
Right. Right. Not until after the war was over. Then we received a paper that told us of what they could tell.
Did how long were y'all separated?
15 months.
And how old was your baby? Tell me your baby's child's name. Your first child.
Anne Marie. A-N-E. Marie. She's 53 years old now.
So how old was she when her daddy came home?
She was born May the 20th, and he came home in December. You want to hear about that? The train that was bringing the troops to Toledo was supposed to arrive at 6 o'clock on this particular morning. And I gathered up the baby, didn't bring any bottles or anything, because the train was supposed to be there at 6 o'clock. The train got stalled outside of Toledo, 10 miles out, and it did not come in until 10 o'clock in the morning. I had a hungry baby, a wet baby. A lady brought a pillowcase so I could change her. That was a long.
That was the longest.
The 4 hours waiting was almost worse than the 15 months. Woody looked at Anne Marie, and the first thing he said was, "Ooh, what big blue eyes she had." We got in the car, and we stopped at Mother and Daddy's, and then we went on to the apartment. And you cannot tell in any amount of words of what it's like after all those months to really be reunited. It's right. But that I would do the whole game all over again.
Would you mind sharing with us, how was Woody different, or are still the same? What things did you perceive different in him, or his experiences
Do you mean when he came home from the war?
after he came home? If you were to compare that to pre-war times.
I can't really compare it too much because you have to understand I did not know Woody too well before I married him. I only saw him 6 times, and I only learned about him through the letters.
And then you were married, how long were you married before you left? You had been married how long?
Well, we were married June 27th of 43, and he left in November of 44. We were together for 14 months before he left. Right? Mm-hmm. Oh, I never gave that any thought. He just came home. He called me from New York when the ship docked. And I did plead with him to go see his mother first. But he didn't. He came to me first. And then we did go home to Pennsylvania to see his mother. And that was hard for her, too. She missed him, too. I can't really say that there was any change. I think Woody was like a lot of them. He didn't talk a lot about the war experiences. I think we just started a life. And it's a long time to remember.
When did y'all become, were y'all a part of the 12th Armored Division?
We became a part of the 12th, I think, when they got to Camp Barkley. I think when they arrived at Barkley is when they really became a part of the 12th. I was always under the impression, I am just sort of finding out that the 134th was organized at Camp Perry, and that at Camp Barkley is when the 12th was as a whole. I'm finding out a lot of things, I really am. But I just take it that the 12th is the 12th, and I've always thanked God for the 12th. And
have y'all been active? Were y'all active in this organization? The 12th organization?
We were members since 1947 when it was. I have the first Hellcat News magazines, or the Hellcat News that we get. I have them from way back.
Do you feel that, did he sit around and talk to the other men about their experiences, or did Woody not do that either?
We never came to too many of the reunions. We came to the Seattle reunion, to the Denver, to the 2 Louisville, and the 1 in Schaumburg, Illinois. I don't know if they sat around and talked too much about their experiences. I think they more or less talked about what they were doing in their lives in the present day.
Tell me about what you and Woody did after the war. What did he do? Other children?
We only had the 1 daughter. We were unable to have any more. Woody had worked for the Department of Public Welfare in Pennsylvania. He started in 1935. And of course, when he came back from the war, he went right back to the Department of Public Welfare. and he worked there until 1975. He retired. But Woody, in 1947, was the first commander of the 814th Reserve Supply Depot in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. He was their commander from 1947 till 1961 and retired as a major. And a year ago in August, there was a memorial service at our cemetery. The government always gives you the plaque when your husband dies. But I bought the bronze plaque that recognizes him as the first commander of the 814th Reserves. I wrote a letter to the commander. I didn't know who he was. In February of, last year, of 97, that it would be their 50th anniversary, and they planned this beautiful memorial service with a 21-gun salute and a beautiful memorial service with a lot of the reserves there. And they had that particular Sunday was their 50th anniversary for the unit to be doing something special. So I'm rather proud of Woodrow.
So he continued in a military.
And he also was in a lot of the Memorial Day parades. He marched in I put him in, he didn't march the entire parade. I put him in just so he could walk into the cemetery and stand with the rest of the group. He did that in May of 95, and then he died a couple weeks later in June. But one of the uniforms that's here, he wore that. I sent all of his dress uniforms.
So if you were to look back on his life, and I guess that would be different. It would be a leader's life and then as a husband. But as a leader, what were Woodrow's strengths that you saw?
Responsibility. And he was a good leader. He knew how to organize. We had an apple orchard. We had an apple orchard. And every year we made apple butter and cider several times. Woody was a farmer. Just an all-around worker. In Pennsylvania, we had the Covered Bridge Festival, which started out as a primitive, and we were the first apple butter boil. That was 17 years ago. And then we also made donuts, starting with the mixing and the rolling and the cutting and the baking, and then we sold them right there. We had a good life, a busy life. And the year that Woody died, I had orders for 97 gallons of cider because I still had the apples in the orchard. Was a little, I only got 81 gallon, but I thought that was, we don't make apple butter anymore, but and I don't have apples this year, but if I do next year, well, I'll still do this.
So do you still live where y'all live?
I do. We built no. Woody built we built a beautiful home. It's in the country right near his homestead. No, don't still farm, but I still live. We built it. Started building it in '56 and have lived there 41 years. He planned every inch of the house on a brown paper bag. They were at a reserve meeting, and one of the men in the reserves, his father, built homes. Anyway, Woody called over to the barracks and asked what he was doing. That he wanted to build a house, and they came over and they planned a house and measured it out. And I can't find the brown paper bag, but I would like to. It seems to me that with all the other stuff that he pack-ratted away, that ought to be there someplace.
Does your daughter live near?
Our daughter lives in New Jersey, about 2 hours away, in Clinton, New Jersey.
And do you have grandchildren?
I have a grandson that's 29, and I have a granddaughter, 16. She'll be 16 in December.
Did you stay home? You stayed out of the marketplace and just worked at home and got to do all those through the years, or did you ever have to go into outside pavement? You worked hard at home. Did you ever work outside the home?
Sort of the little odd job type things. I worked at a restaurant as a waitress in 1963 when Ann was graduating from high school. I also reported the Mifflinville News for several years until they no longer wanted small town news. But that would be something like, for instance, if I were to go home from this, and I would write up a little article that Eloise and I had been to Abilene, Texas for this particular experience. That type of things.
As you look back over the years, and you'd already told me that you wouldn't ever change, you wouldn't change your life.
Mm-hmm.
But what is the heritage that your marriage did your marriage have? What heritage have you given to your daughter and to your children? Yours and Woodrow's relationship.
Do you mean like in terms of stability?
Mm-hmm. The strengths of your marriage that you've shown to those after you.
I would say that we were a pretty stable couple. I would say so. I wasn't exactly idle. I didn't work, but I worked as a volunteer at the hospital for several years. I also, when I say political, if you wanted to run for an office and you wanted me to work for you, standing out in front of the polls telling, you know what I mean? Representing you. I have done that for about 35 years. And it's very interesting and it's fun. I've also served on our church council, and Woody did too. Been on an advisory board for children and youth services. We haven't exactly been too idle.
I didn't think you'd hear
We've had we've had a very interesting life. And we live in the center of the woods, and we always had a lot of leaves to rake. So I mean, I am going to be going home and raking up all that glory that has fallen down.
Is there anything that I have missed
don't think so.
It's a neat life. I appreciate you sharing your story with us.
I would do it all over again. I've just always been very grateful that when Woody went to Camp Campbell, that he didn't find himself another girl, and he could easily have done that, but he didn't. So as I said before, I think God put you exactly where you're supposed to be at the right time.
I'm going to ask one last question before we quit. And I think I know the answer, but I want this for the tape. Why are you giving so much of y'all's life to a museum, an Abilene museum?
Because where is it going to go after I am gone? Who is going to care? Because this is where it belongs. This was our life. Because of the 12th, that's what we were all about, really. Why, to me, this is where it has to be. I wouldn't know what else to do with it. You can't sell it. Who would want his uniforms? He wore those uniforms with the 12th. That's where they belong. A lot of the orders, the papers, have to do with the 12th. It's just where it belongs.
We're grateful to you that you can trust us.
It's been hard, but it's been good.
Well, thanks.
Thank you.